UFOs. And what makes this book remarkable is the tone that the author has adopted. This is not a book for true believers. This is a book for people who think about things. And what Leslie Kean has done in this book, by the way, a foreword written by John Podesta, who used to be chief of staff, I think, of Bill Clinton. But what Leslie Kean has done in this book is to put forward, I think, the irrefutable argument that no one does know exactly what UFOs or unidentified aerial phenomena really are. But is there anybody out there who thinks, who doesn't now has come to the conclusion that this is something worthy of serious study? This is not something to be left to the stuff of TV miniseries or the rantings of people who have no critical faculty. And Leslie Kean's book is a piece of superb research into, I think, the most fascinating of all subjects that we have here on Earth and maybe off of it. Leslie Kean, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. It's great to be with you.
You know, I read the book and I started to think of a trip I took. I've mentioned this once before on the air. I took a trip into Vancouver in a 767, and the pilots were good enough to invite me into the cockpit. The subject turned to this subject, and the Canadian Airlines pilot looked at me and he said, you know, if I told you a true answer to your question, which was, have you ever seen anything that you just couldn't explain while you were flying? Long career. He looked at me and he said, my career would have been over. But he said, I will tell you, one time coming back from Vancouver to Toronto, we saw objects that we knew were otherworldly. And I said, how could you tell that? And he said, well, nothing on Earth flies at Mach 9 in formation and vectors at 90 degrees. But he never did report that. And one of the points that I think is central to your book is you are not saying that extraterrestrial spacecraft exist. You're saying it is a rational hypothesis that we haven't really seriously followed up on.
That's exactly right, and it's not just me that's saying that. Because as I just want to mention, the subtitle of the book is "Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record." Yeah, and the book includes a collection of first-person pieces actually written by high-level authorities from around the world, including 5 generals.
18 of them.
Yeah, there are 18 contributors, 17 other pieces of varying lengths, and I kind of weave my narrative around these other people, and it all kind of works out really well together.
It's a brilliant strategy.
You make a very important point, and it's and these authorities, which are people who have studied this for decades on behalf of governments, I mean, they all would agree with that the extraterrestrial hypothesis is an extremely rational one. It shouldn't be laughed at. It's valid. It makes a lot of sense. It's hard to think of what else they might be. But the bottom line is we have not done enough research to know 100% what they are. And hypothesis, is only an hypothesis. We have to have, more proof, more solid documentation. We have a lot of documentation without a doubt that there is a phenomenon, that these objects exist, just like what the pilot told you. I mean, that's been reported many, many, many times. Something exists. Yeah. And it's a really profound and mysterious question that we have in our hands. What are these things? And all we're asking for in this book is that we initiate some kind of investigation that will actually solve the mystery. But it needs to be solved. We can't jump to conclusions right now and just say, oh, they're extraterrestrial, we're being visited. We don't know that.
I read your book closely, and some of the incidents familiar, some are not, all in much greater detail than I've ever read before, and all coming from people directly involved, often military people. As you said, the subtitles, generals, pilots, and government officials. I want to go to the Rendlesham Forest incident, and I'd like you to take us through what you have written about it from the point of view of the sergeant who, in the book, says he actually touched what he thought was a spacecraft and had a strange reaction on his forearms, felt electrical voltage. That particular account, there's many in this book, but I thought we could begin by just getting how you felt. I mean, you were doing a piece, you started out this as a piece for the Boston Globe, trying to get this subject taken seriously, and then you realized this can't be done, in, no matter how many newspaper articles, it can't be done properly, it has to be seriously done, and this was one of the parts you pulled together, the Rendlesham Forest story. Tell us a little bit about that, and the sergeant who was the chief security officer who actually went up and touched what he believes is a spacecraft.
Okay, and I'm really glad you brought that up because I do think it is one of the more chilling and more extraordinary aspects of the book. And again, it wasn't me that was writing about it. It was him. He wrote this piece in his own words. His name is Sergeant James Peniston, and he was only 25 when this happened. I mean, he was just a young security agent working for this on the Rendlesham Forest. Actually, the Bentwaters is the name of the base.
The biggest base they have.
Yeah, a very large joint American, base, two bases that were connected in the UK, but, they had Americans stationed over there because it was an American base in the UK. And he was with two other gentlemen, and it was they received this report that something had come down in the woods, and they just assumed it was some kind of airplane or something, and they went out, and because they were the security police, got closer and closer to it, and he saw this triangular-shaped thing sitting on the ground. I mean, initially they saw light coming from it, and he approached it on foot. One of the men stayed back to kind of keep radio communications going, but another one went with him. And he was standing close to this thing for about 45 minutes, was his estimate. I mean, they actually had equipment measuring, taking the times and everything, but it is really, really phenomenal. He had a notebook with him, and all the notes of what he saw and what he was doing during that time were all written down, and he still has that notebook. And in fact, we have two of the original pages from that notebook reproduced in the book. One of them shows symbols that were on this craft that he saw. Really bizarre kind of shapes and circles and stuff, which are reprinted in the book. He's actually drawn a picture of what the craft looked like, this triangular thing just sitting there. And he does describe, as you mentioned, what it felt like to him, how his hair stood on end, and how it affected him. I mean, this man, he's never recovered from this. This was a major event in his life, and it had a lot of effect on him. He still doesn't know what it was, but he also wrote in his notebook when the thing took off, he actually watched it take off. It was
Speed
so fast.
impossible.
Speed impossible. That's one of the more famous. I mean, and he describes in the book what it was. The fact that he wrote that. I mean, he's never written in the kind of detail and from the kind of personal perspective that you're going to get in this book. So it is a really, really special chapter. And that whole case. I mean, it happened over a number of days. The Bentwaters case, the Rendlesham Forest case. It's just, such a well-documented case, and it wasn't just his event of seeing the thing having landed, but there were other things that happened, too, within a few days of that.
It's interesting, too, the ring of truth to a personal account, and I don't mean by that his conclusions are right, but it's a statement that you don't wonder whether he actually is thinking what he is telling you. You kind of get the feeling when someone says, we were there, looking at this for 45 minutes, and then the light from the craft begins to intensify. And now a little bit of fear kicks in with them. They don't notice any noise or any disturbance on the ground. Now they fall back. All has the ring of observational truth. I think he saw what he thought he saw, no matter what it was. You never have a doubt when you read his account, this guy had a profoundly transformative experience with something that nobody understands.
And I know him quite well, and he's just the most sincere, down-to-earth guy. I mean, you're absolutely right. You can say, well, it wasn't a UFO if you don't want to believe that.
Yeah.
And he doesn't know what it was, but he certainly has never seen anything on this planet ever since or ever before that could do the things that this thing can do. I mean, what are you supposed to think?
On your behalf, I just want to say this was one of the rules of thumb that you used in writing this book. You talk about your personal code of credibility standards, and one of them is you got to meet the people and you got to get to know them. And all throughout this bit and piece, every one of the extraordinary stories, it's not somebody picking this up from Dr. Google. You were at the base of this with the people who were there.
Right. I made very, very certain that, the people had incredible, impeccable credibility. And there's a couple of them that I haven't met personally, but most of them I have. The ones I haven't met, I've certainly spoken to and, done all the research that a journalist would do before assessing a source.
Yeah.
Talked to other people, looked at the background, all the work that they've done, et cetera, et cetera. So I have complete faith in the people that have contributed to this book.
We're going to take a short break in our discussion with Leslie Kean. She is the author of a really fantastic book on this subject. It's a book that doesn't overreach. It's a book that lets its research speak for itself. You can decide what it means. And Leslie Kean is not saying extraterrestrials exist, but what she is saying very well with great documentation is the hypothesis is serious. It's about time we took it seriously, maybe even set up an agency to study this systematically and scientifically instead of leaving it to the true believers and the skeptics.
Michael Harris live on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA.
Good afternoon, folks. Welcome back to the program. Our special guest for this hour is Leslie Kean. She's an investigative journalist and an author, and she's written a sensational book in the best sense of the word called UFOs. Generals, pilots, and government officials go on the record, and really this book, on the basis of the evidence, is a plea for us to take the phenomena seriously without jumping to conclusions about what it is. Leslie, as a person who's written a few books myself, I know the importance of early chapters. One of the events that you highlight is the UAP wave over Belgium. Quite incredible, both in terms of duration, numbers of sightings. I think 143 sightings were reported in a very small area. And you devote a lot of time to this particular account by Major General Wilfried de Brouwer. And if I've mispronounced it, please feel free to correct me.
You have his name perfectly. Perfect pronunciation. Now, Wilfried de Brouwer did write an extraordinary chapter. I agree with you. He was actually a colonel at the time that the wave happened in 1989-90, and he was assigned by the Ministry of Defense to sort of manage the Air Force investigation of these repeated sightings, as you mentioned. The first night, there were 143, in one evening, including numerous police officers. I mean, it was really spectacular. There were a number of different objects. There were triangular objects with bright lights on each corner and a sort of a red light in the middle. That was the most common description. Mm-hmm. And Wilfried de Brouwer was in charge, and he was now Major
night.
General. What's that? Clear night?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was a clear night, and you had people from all these different locations reporting the same thing.
Yeah.
And of course, the police officers, when they got the calls initially, they sort of giggled and said, "Oh my God, they're calling them about UFOs." Well, They ended up seeing them themselves. Two different pairs of police officers in particular that General de Brouwer writes about, and they observed some very, very odd behavior one of the things was this red light ball that was this red ball that was coming out of the object. I mean, it really sounds like something out of science fiction, but it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
The ball would come out and kind of look like it was searching around for something and then go back into the craft. I mean, and General de Brouwer presents a series of witness drawings that are fascinating, different accounts of what witnesses saw. One of them was a military man, Colonel Almond, who actually reported this to the Ministry of Defense.
He gave a drawing of the ventral side.
Exactly. And there are lots of drawings of the ventral side, and there's also a spectacular photograph that General de Brouwer has vetted. It's been analyzed by 3 or 4 different laboratories.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the best UFO photos we have.
Now tell us a little bit about that, because a lot of people say, "Oh, it's been to the airbrush lab," but in fact, this particular photograph was carefully looked at, and there were no effects of infrared radiation, no indication of tampering with the slide, and a lot of other things that put it in a class by itself.
I agree with you. I mean, one of the things you always have to do is know who the witness is. I mean, General de Brouwer actually met the witness. The lab was analyzed through enough labs to know that it had not been tampered with. I mean, they can tell all of these things. This was at actual 35 millimeters transparency. It was not a digital picture.
Yeah.
So, and they were able to learn a great deal about the light from the objects and the radiation that was involved. And it's just a close-up, crystal-clear photograph. And what's interesting about it is the original photograph just shows the lights, because the lights are so bright that they block out anything else. So all they did was they took that original photograph and slightly increased the contrast. That's not messing with it at all. You just increase the contrast on the image, and you can clearly see the outline of the triangular craft. I mean, you can clearly see this craft sitting there with these bright lights on it. It's just really fascinating. We have both of those images reproduced in the book, and these are the best possible copies available, which I got directly from the general. So
there's a few pictures in this book that are just breathtaking. There's just no other word for them. Either they're what they appear to be, or I'm having a hallucination. We're going to take a call from Tony on line 1, calling us from Ottawa. Tony, welcome to the program.
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Hi there.
Good. This is a great topic. I just wanted to chime in. I'm a member of the Ottawa Skeptics here in Ottawa, an organization of skeptics. Also, I'm an active member and organizer of the Center for Inquiry branch that's opening in Ottawa. And these type of issues we discuss all the time. Like, many of our members are into astronomy. I am as well. And
I think you could probably characterize Leslie Kean. I think you could probably characterize Leslie Kean as a skeptic too. She's not a
absolutely. And actually, what I wanted to do is quickly talk to some of the points that were said, with your previous caller as well. because, we tend to talk about these issues a lot and from the scientific angle, and it was just recently said on the show that, it would be hoped that eventually we could take this issue seriously and come up to it from a scientific perspective. Well, I just want to inform everybody, if they didn't already know, that has already been happening for decades. Like, I mean, if you
not at a government level,
project,
not at a government level, it hasn't.
Well, the SETI project with NASA is a great example.
No, I don't agree with it. SETI is the kind of research project that we're talking about.
Okay, well,
that's not what we're talking about in the book anyway.
Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. In order to take something seriously scientifically, it doesn't matter if you know the answer or if you have anecdotal evidence or anything. You have to have evidence that you can display and demonstrate.
True.
And then it gets even crazier when you have problems that, for example, break the fundamental laws of physics. So, for example, your previous caller or previous guest had said that he was making a comment about, some of these organisms or whatever that, apparently people have seen that come from other galaxies. Now, I don't know how he would be able to know that they come from other galaxies, but if they were to, then you would have to explain, how did they circumvent the speed of light? Or
I don't know why the guest would have made that comment, because we don't yet know. I mean, to say that we have visitors from other galaxies.
Tony, just a sec. Let Leslie answer here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I can't speak for the other guests, but I would completely agree with the caller that it is we should not be making claims that we have visitors here from other galaxies and that they're organisms. I mean, we absolutely have no evidence for that, at least not to the extent that we have the evidence for a physical phenomenon in the sky, and that's the only thing that my book is dealing with, and I think that's what the scientists need to focus on. And, if somebody says to you there are visitors from other galaxies, well, that's not the issue we need to focus on, because that's an impossible one to study.
Leslie, tell me this, and Tony, you chime in on this one too. With so many sightings, why so few photographs?
You want me to respond to that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting question, and I do discuss that in the book. And there's a lot of reasons for it. I mean, one of the major reasons is, and I've talked to countless witnesses to this phenomenon, that when you actually see one of these things, you're you're transfixed on looking at it. Usually, you don't have very much time before it disappears. And if it's drifting slowly overhead, you do not want to take your eyes off this.
You're mesmerized.
You're mesmerized, and the last thing you want to do is go look for your camera. Now, nowadays, people have cameras more readily available. Back at the time of the Belgian wave, they didn't have digital cameras. They didn't have camcorders and all the things we have now. Mm-hmm. So we did get a great photograph. There were other photographs that were taken, and part of the thing is that their standards of acceptance were so rigorous that even if something looked pretty good, if they didn't have an absolute, 100% certainty about that photograph, they would not put it on the record. So it's the rigor that you're going to use in your acceptance. It's the fact that witnesses are not concerned about taking pictures lots of times.
Leslie,
and lots of times they don't come out. That's the third part. I mean, there could be all kinds of radiation, infrared radiation, and all kinds of radiation around these objects that actually prevent them from showing up in film. We've had that happen before, too.
We're going to take a short break here for the news, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the possible impact of maybe strong magnetic fields around these objects. Even military aircraft having their weapon systems disabled when they came in for a kill when tracking UFOs. We'll be back with Leslie Kean and Tony and you too right after the news. Please stay with me here on Michael Harris Live if you can.